Hey, welcome back to the Soul Pod. This is Stacy. Have you ever had an experience where you met someone and it's like you knew them? Like, I mean, really knew them already? And maybe not as this person, not like, hey, we've met before, but something deep inside of you resonated with them in a way that you knew that you had met them before, but maybe not as this person. Or have you ever had a recurring dream or recurring memory of a life, something that happened in your life, but it wasn't your life. It was a different life. This is the sort of thing that people go to hypnotherapists for, past life regressionists specifically. Today, I want to talk about past life regression therapy and my experience with it. I'm going to share with you today a deep dive I took into something that made me incredibly uncomfortable and share with you what I learned from it, that it might be useful to you. You can decide. There's a saying that belief is the brain's strongest drug. And that might be true. We'll come back to that quote before we're done. Belief is an amazing thing and it's incredibly powerful. In the early 80s, Dr. Brian Weiss was a psychotherapist. He was kind of early on in using hypnosis in his therapy. It wasn't all that popular yet. Now it's become much more mainstream. But what happened was he was working with a patient named Catherine who had a bunch of anxieties and fears and phobias that he couldn't seem to work through. He was trying to figure out exactly what the patient, what the deal was with them. And he was able to sort of deal with some of her condition and sort of reduce some of the stuff, but the big stuff remained. So he decided to try to use hypnotherapy with her. And so, like, he took her in, started working with her on that level, kind of regressing her back to earlier in her life to try to figure out what are the things that maybe she's repressing that she's not able to work through. You see that we have a lot of things in our life that we may repress because they were so traumatic, or perhaps they happened prior to our first memory. Most of us have our first memory around 3.5. But sometimes stuff happens prior to that. That is the foundation of our lives. So a lot of our insecurities and all that we can't tap into because we don't remember them. And a lot of our things that are super traumatic, we block out. So in hypnotherapy, you can kind of get to that sometimes. And so his hope was to do a deep dive into Catherine and kind of get her to regress back to that point where she could talk about it. So what he found was that she kept going back and finding things, traumatic things that they could work through. But after a short period of time, he realized that it wasn't her life she was talking about. It was an earlier life. Through the words that she is using, the descriptions she was giving, the names that she was giving, like it wasn't even her name she was talking about, he started to realize something was off. Now, mind you, no one had ever done past life regression therapy before this. This wasn't something that was well discussed or understood or even published. He wrote the first book about this. So it kind of threw him. He's a very mainstream guy, very straight laced in terms of his stuff, not woo woo, not out there. So this was weird. He had to wonder, I'd imagine, am I being played? Is there something really loose upstairs here? Is she playing me? Is there some wacky thing going on? Is she schizophrenic? I mean, as a therapist, he had to go through the whole list of possibilities, right? Because he wants to help her, but he also wants to make sure that he understands exactly what's happening. But what he found was that as they were going through the therapy week after week after week, her symptoms, her phobias, her anxieties, they were going away. And what he was doing was he was taking her previous lives that she was talking about through these therapies to deal with the things that she had suffered in her previous lives. Now, whether or not they were true, who knows? But the therapy worked. She became stronger, happier, less anxious than she'd ever been. Like full recovery as far as he was concerned. Over a period of, about a year or so, she no longer needed him. And he said she went on to have a very happy life. Now, her real name wasn't Catherine. She was a patient, so he used a pseudonym, doctor-patient confidentiality and all that. At some point, he was probing to try to figure out exactly what was going on, and he was asking her a lot of questions. And one of the questions is, she would talk about they say, and he said, who are they? And she said, the masters. So she used this term, the masters, which is kind of like guides on the other side. Now, if you think about past life regression, if you have multiple lives based on this belief system that Catherine was sharing, then there's also the in-between space where you die, you wait, you're reborn, you die, you're reborn. So there's these spaces in between of this sort of space. And she talked about the guides being the people in the middle space, or the masters, she called them. And so at some point, he started asking her, some certain questions, and she came out and talked to him about his father and his son who were on the other side, and they were okay. Well, this threw him because she didn't know about his father being dead. I mean, she might make a wild guess that, his father could be dead because he was probably around 40 at the time. And so his father would have been older. But to guess that his son was dead too, this isn't something he talked about. This was a very personal thing. His son had died as an infant of a heart condition. And it was a very painful thing, of course. So he didn't talk about it. Certainly didn't talk to his patients about it. He didn't even talk to his colleagues about it, he says. So it was shocking that she knew. And what was more shocking was that she explained that his son had died from a heart malady. And even more so, what convinced him was that she shared things about his father's personality, about specific quirky things that his father did or said on the other side that absolutely convinced him. Despite his skeptical scientific mind, Dr. Weiss decided this was the case, that this something real was happening here. Of course, this completely melted his brain, right? It changed his world model. I mean, he's a very scientific, clinical guy. And now he's got to look at this thing from like, what the heck is going on? Like, he's just discovered something. I'd imagine he probably thought, am I losing my mind? This is wild. So he went on to write the book, Many Lives, Many Masters. Great book, by the way. I'll share a link in the show notes. Many Lives, Many Masters. And this talks about not just his case with Catherine, but the many cases he had after that. This came out in 1988, I believe it was, where he shared stories of regressions that he did, past life regressions, and how he very consistently got results with these patients when he regressed them to past lives. And a lot of the things he was able to have them talk about, he was actually able to confirm science or historical facts about many of these cases, where they would tell him something he didn't know about. He would research it and find that, sure enough, what they're saying is actually something that's true. So either all these patients came in really well rehearsed, and they, someone was having a great big joke on him, or this is the real deal. It seems unlikely that patient after patient after patient would be playing a joke on him, having one over on him. So I read the book Many Lives, Many Masters after my spiritual awakening. This was 8-9 years ago, and there was a line in it that really resonated with me, and that's, our bodies are just a vehicle for our souls. They're just temporary houses. This is one of the things he wrote. Now, this really clicked for me because after my spiritual awakening, I suddenly realized I'm immortal. Like, this had never, I'd been raised in the church, sang in the choir, I saved at the age of 12, and then, of course, I walked away from all that at some point, which I've talked about before. But I'd never felt that I'm immortal. I'd never felt that I was immortal till after my spiritual awakening. I had a moment in a hammock in the woods where it's like the knowledge of the universe was poured in here about being immortal and about never die. Now, mind you, I didn't know I had a fear of death until after that happened. You see, we walk around all day long with the weight of the reality of our world on us. It's like boulders in a backpack. And it's not until we drop those anxieties, those fears, those things that we're used to carrying, that we notice they're gone. I didn't realize I had a fear of death. I mean, I realized, okay, I know I am a mortal person and I'm going to die someday, but I didn't actively think about how much that weighed. It's just a normal part of my everyday life. Well, after my spiritual awakening, within a day or two, I realized I weighed seemingly nothing, because this gigantic boulder that was the fear of death had fallen away, because now I know I don't die. None of us die. So when he talked about our bodies are just the vehicles for our souls, this is almost word for word the way I describe it to people. I tell people this life is like a taxi and we're driving it. and our soul sitting in the back seat, not making a fuss, just along for the ride. So this quote was so close to the way I describe, this way we are, this immortal self, this immortal life that we're driving. Well, after I read Weiss's book and read about past life regression, it clicked something else in me too. You see, my whole life, I've had a recurring dream. I mean, as far back as I can remember, as a small child, I had this recurring dream of driving a car along a coastal road, long coastal road, and then I come to a bridge and there's flooding and there's water flowing. And the problem is that the water's flowing under a creek and it's just barely over the top of the bridge, maybe a foot above, and it's flowing into the ocean, right? And I pause for a moment and I look at it and I determine I can make it across this bridge. It's fairly short. And so I go for it. And the problem is that in the dream, it always ends the same way, where the water, the pressure from the creek pushes the car up and over the edge of the bridge and into the water. And my last thought in the dream is always, I just killed us, because it's me and a passenger, me and another guy. And it's a very vivid dream, which is really bizarre for, a kid 5, 6, 7, 8 years old to have, driving a car and thinking about the specifics of the shape of it and like all the detail of it, the person sitting next to me, the emotional connection I have with this person. And so on top of that, I've always had this fear of water over my head. Like my brothers and we grew up swimming in the river, and I like to swim and I like to go to the pool and all these things, but I did not like water over my head. And I did not like deep water. I couldn't see the bottom of it. It made me very uncomfortable. It didn't make anyone else in my family uncomfortable. I don't know where that fear came from. So those two things, it's like, okay, I keep having this recurring dream about this thing that happened in this car that doesn't make any sense because I've been having this my whole life. And I've got this fear of water over my head. So I wonder, maybe this is a past life. Who knows? So I went and checked it out. I went and I had a past life regression done. And I recorded it so I could listen to it again when I was done. When I had this past life regression done, I was awake. So I was somewhere between being asleep and being awake. There's this state in between the two. I wanted to record it because I wanted to know if there's anything I missed, like if I was out, because I've never had hypnosis done, right? So I recorded it and went back and listened to it, and I was awake the whole time. I was just in that strange state between sleep and awake. And so I remember everything that happened and everything we talked about, and I remember the regression going back to it. One of my intentions was to understand this dream. She regressed me to a point where it was actually before the space where the dream started, 10 or 15 minutes before. Me and my passenger, we pulled over and we looked at the bridge and we talked about it and we discussed whether or not we thought we could make it across. And we both agreed that we could. So we went ahead and we went across. And it ended just like the dream. We went off the edge of the bridge. And again, I had this thought, I just killed us. It wasn't even like panic. It was just an acknowledgement that I just did this thing. The end result of the past life regression for me was this. I now knew it wasn't me that killed us. It was a decision the two of us made. We stopped, we discussed it, we decided we could do it as an agreement. So it wasn't me killing us, it was us both dying. Now, did this really happen? Is this just a dream, a really vivid dream for a small child to have? Or did it really happen? I don't know. I don't know. I can tell you this, I paid around $350 for the past life regression. About $350, and it was worth it. It was worth it for that one subtle thing of understanding that, hey, you know what? I didn't kill us. We just happened to both die based on an agreement we made. And whether it's real or not, who knows? There's this thing, the placebo effect, right? One study I recently read about with anti-anxiety medications, when they do a clinical study for them, they have to have a control group, which the control group is you get the placebo, right? Well, the placebo group, it turns out, has 30 to 50% effectiveness, meaning that nearly half of them have the same effect, positive effect, that the drug gives people that actually take the drug. So, is past life regression real? Maybe. Is that life that I remembered and I dreamt about real? Maybe. And even if it's not, let's say you go to a past life regression therapist and you get some sort of relief for whatever is going on. Well, that's pretty darn good. You still get the effect. We may never know whether any of this stuff is real, maybe not until the day we die. But if you still get a positive effect from it, that's something, isn't it? Thank you for being here. Thanks for watching the channel. I really appreciate everyone who visits. I also appreciate the comments. Leave some comments down below. If you've had past life regression therapy, or you're thinking about it, or you have a story about that, or maybe a recurring dream or something that applies to this video, share it. Love the comments, and it's also a great conversation starter for other people that are interested in this topic. Thanks again for being here, and I'll see you on the next video.